Watching News at Prime, let's get into this now. National Police Commissioner Fannie Masemola has defended Operation Vala Umgodi, which was carried out in Stilfontein in the northwest. The operation, which sought to put an end to illegal mining in the province, claimed the lives of more than 70 people. This was back in 2024. Law enforcement officials were criticized after routes used to deliver supplies were blocked. This was in a bid to flush out the zamas. Masemola, who was answering questions during the South African Human Rights Commission's second leg of the mining inquiry, has raised concerns over the accuracy of the figures that have been shared relating to people who were underground. Let's take a listen for a moment.
Point on the 12th of November, if I'm correct, he had a meeting with the committee. They raised their concern about the people that are hungry and so on. And he agreed with them that, let's allow sufficient food to go down. The issue was they don't know how many people were there. And they sent, I think, one of the committee members down, which they came with a figure of 4,500. And from there, they started allowing food and water and instant porridges to go down. But there were those that still took chance to want to send down your other stuff, contraband, like your generators again and other stuff, which they were prevented from doing that. And to show that the figure that was given, probably people wanted more supplies so that they can then stay down there. We were given a figure of there are plus minus 4,500 people down there. But at the end of the operation, people that came out was 1,800 something, not even closer to the 4,000. So.
Meanwhile, the acting police minister, Professor Firoz Kachalia, said he is not in a position to answer questions about Operation Vala Umgodi. Kachalia says illegal mining is something that is terrorizing communities and law enforcement should work to curb the operations, as these have also spread to other provinces.
I'm not sure that I'm in a position to reflect retrospectively on what must have been a very complex and fraught situation for the police. And I think that my perspective would certainly be influenced by my experience recently visiting various communities affected by illegal mining by the so-called zamas. Most recently is Sporong in Zamantungwa, where 400 of the most marginalized people in that community who were displaced by armed zama groups.
Well, let's stay with this conversation now, and we are joined by Zamantungwa Mbeki. She is the acting head of legal services at the South African Human Rights Commission. Good evening to you, Ms. Mbeki, and thank you very much for your time. As we say, this is the second leg, and I want to just give the viewers a proper description of what you are doing here as this Human Rights Commission. And you say it's the second leg of the national inquiry into policy framework around artisanal mining, the impact of artisanal mining on the human rights of surrounding communities, and the scope and tactics employed in Operation Vala Umgodi. What is this exercise all about? What do you seek to achieve?
Firstly, thank you for having us, Oli. It is an extensive exercise if one has to consider really what is the policy framework around artisanal mining, because we understand that artisanal mining, the concept and work that has been done over the years, is a very complex issue, and it's not just an issue that can be resolved on policy on its own. That's why we've said that we want to look at policy. We want to also look at all of the stakeholders who are mandated to respond to issues of artisanal mining, as the National Commissioner just said now. But not just that. We then had a backstory, if we can put it that way, which is what then happened at Stilfontein. So we want then what happened at Stilfontein as a case study, if you can put it that way, and how it brings into force the effects and the implications and applications of existing policies, and whether there is a gap. And where there is this gap, which we all have different questions as it relates to what happened and should have happened in Stilfontein, in Mpumalanga, in Randfontein, etc. Those are the gaps that we would want to then identify through the inquiry, if they are there, and to make sure that we do not find ourselves in a similar situation again.
Very well explained. However, I'm going to try and put myself in the shoes of someone I shouldn't, and that is the minister responsible for this environment. That's the Minister of Minerals, Gwede Mantashe, because I would want to think that the Human Rights Commission is discussing the policy of artisanal mining. And knowing him, he will say, but how do you discuss artisanal mining within the context of illegal mining operations? So where does artisanal mining come in when you talk about Stilfontein? Because South Africa, the world, as was reported by even foreign journalists, Stilfontein was an illegal mining activity conducted by people, many of whom are not of South African origin, although they have support from some of the communities from which they operate. And so the essence of my question is, are you not jumping the gun by going directly into artisanal mining when we are talking about illegal mining activities?
That is why, Oli, we said that we have to look at whether the current policy is fit for purpose, right? Does it then mean that when we are talking about illegal operations or unlawful operations, and those that have to then be defined, that there should be no regulation or no document that speaks to how the officials should then conduct themselves? Because what we have time and time again is a situation where we say, oh, X is regulated, and we are very clear on the regulation. We also understand that there are challenges with the regulation, people getting permits, and the sector on its own. However, what we face is that when we have a crisis, when we have an issue, like I said, the backstory, then we find ourselves saying, hold on, we actually don't have anything that guides us when a situation like this happens. And then we're left wondering, is this illegal mining? Is this artisanal mining? Are these, who should be at the forefront? Is this a SAPS operation? Is this a DOD operation? Is this a DME operation? Do you understand that one of the challenges that we have is, not to put it loosely, is that we must cater for situations where we can be caught with our pants down. Realistic and realizing that this problem is a problem that, to a great extent, seems to be 2, 4, 5 steps ahead of all of the departments, because even now, as the National Commissioner said, after Stilfontein, we still had another issue in Mpumalanga, we still had another issue in Randfontein, and those are the ones that just made mainstream media. What about the ones that don't? So clearly, the issue is not to say that they're interlinked, but not the same, but they're interlinked. And however, what is important is that when there is a response, what should that response be? And it should not be a response that is, as we saw now, over-regulated by the courts where somebody else is not clear. Should you send food down? Should you not send food down? Who should be responding and by when? And I think those are one of the things that we should also just be cognizant of, is that from the Commission's perspective and under the Constitution, that there are also those guarantees, like the right to life, that still remains when situations like this, though uncomfortable to put forward for some people, those constitutional prerogatives, they still exist. And what role should they also be playing?
Absolutely. Human rights or human life is sacrosanct. Let's then understand the attitude of Minister Mantashe's department. All I'm simply asking you here is, are they willing participants in this process?
Yes, they're willing participants. They will be coming tomorrow. Minister Mantashe will be presenting evidence tomorrow. We also have the Department of Social Development and other departments that should really play a role when we consider this, some that we might not even think of. Like I said, like social development, home affairs, who've already presented their evidence earlier on. You made mention of the documentation status. So all of these are as a department, DME, have been very responsive, and they've indicated that they will be at the inquiry tomorrow.
And I ask you for their attitude toward the process you are conducting, because oftentimes when I have spoken to Minister Mantashe on this issue of illegal mining, he is very clear. He almost puts an arm's length distance to say, I'm not going to talk on illegal mining activities. That's a police matter. I don't fit into that space. I'm wondering, therefore, what explanation there has been from their side about the policy of artisanal mining, because the mining affected communities, for example, they will tell you that the scope of artisanal mining in South Africa is too small. It needs to be expanded given the poverty crisis and the poverty that comes with unemployment, of course, in the country. And so I'm wondering, you are now in the second leg of this inquiry. What has Minister Mantashe's explanation been about artisanal mining in South Africa and whether it is big enough to accommodate this demand that we are seeing?
I think, Oli, I must give the minister the opportunity to reply to those sort of questions himself with the department. We would not want, as the commission, to preempt what the minister would say. Maybe you will raise that as an issue when giving evidence tomorrow, to say, is there a distinction between the two, and also to provide us with that distinction then going forward. But I would not want to put words in his mouth. He will give his evidence under oath, and we are looking forward to hear what he would have to say on behalf of the department. But I mean, looking at what SAHRC had to say today on their conduct and how far it goes, it does bring an issue of intersectionality, because at the end of the day, the cause of action arises on a property where mining activity did take place.
Yeah.
So we cannot dispute that, because it didn't happen in the air. It was at some point a license holder, and that license holder was provided, that license was provided by the department. So there is some level where we say, when we look at a cause of action and who plays a role in terms of, like, I want to say the chain. I mean, somebody must give them the license, somebody must do an environmental assessment, impact, etc. Somebody has to see to the rehabilitation. But now when something goes wrong, and this is why I keep saying that, we're not looking at also, we must look that when things go wrong, we must not say it's this person, this person, it's that person. It must be clear to all of us, you and I included, that it is the minister or it is not the minister's responsibility. And we must afford him that opportunity. Maybe tomorrow at this time, we will be unpacking the minister's statement.
Absolutely. I'll be keen to do exactly that, and I look forward to seeing those submissions from the minister. Thank you very much for the time being, and looking forward, by the way, to see the outcomes of the work that you are conducting here as the South African Human Rights Commission. Zamantungwa Mbeki is within the legal department of the South African Human Rights Department. Thank you very much for your time.